Since I like going back and listening to my old thoughts, I'm currently in the process of re-uploading some of my older videos in order to make them more compliant with YouTube's policies on reused content. But since I didn't want to do a lot of editing, here is the audio from my original review for this movie. I wish I knew how to pump out these movie reviews a lot quicker because I saw Dune in theaters weeks ago, but I'm barely releasing a video on it now, after the sequel was already announced. The truth of the matter is, I was at a total loss for words when trying to describe my thoughts on the film. It is such an overwhelming experience that I didn't really know what to say about the movie, other than you should go watch it. But you should go watch it. Dune is easily one of the best films and probably my favorite movie of the entire year. Don't be discouraged if you haven't read the books, or if you haven't seen the previous adaptations, or if you thought the film looked too dense or too high in concept to enjoy. I was completely unfamiliar with Dune before I saw this adaptation, and I gotta say, director Denis Villeneuve did a fantastic job of making this world incredibly easy for viewers to digest. So the basic synopsis goes something like this. Paul is a gifted young man born into the great house of Atreides. When the Atreides house is called to harvest spice on the desert planet Arrakis, conflict ensues with planet natives known as the Fremen and the rival house of Harkonnen. So the great and powerful houses fight with one another in order to improve their own family dynasties, resulting in murder, betrayal, and all-out war. It's kind of like Game of Thrones, but in space. In fact, if I had to describe this movie to people, I would say that it's the perfect love child between Game of Thrones and Star Wars. I even remember thinking to myself as I was watching this film in theaters, this is what it must have been like for audiences who saw the original Star Wars back in 1977. Because, as an avid Star Wars fan myself, it's easy to see where George Lucas took inspiration from Dune. Frank Herbert's novel has been described as one of, if not the most influential science fiction books of all time, and it's easy to see why. However, it's hard to imagine that anyone other than Denis Villeneuve could have done a better job at adapting this story for the big screen. And that's because this incarnation of Dune is such an awesome visual experience. This movie is filled with breathtaking cinematography, an outstandingly seamless blend between digital and practical effects, and an engaging story that is both intimate and epic in scope at the same time. I was completely floored by this visually thrilling feature. And I haven't even mentioned the wonderful soundtrack composed by Hans Zimmer or the fantastic performances. Timothée Chalamet is obviously great in the lead role, and I loved his chemistry with Oscar Isaac, who plays his steadfast yet caring father, Leto Atreides, Rebecca Ferguson, who plays his loving yet powerful mother, Lady Jessica, and Jason Momoa, who plays his adventurous mentor, Duncan Idaho. These characters allow us to see the world through Paul's own character as he comes to understand his place in the galaxy. The rest of the cast, comprised of Josh Brolin, David Dastmalchian, Dave Bautista, and Zendaya, are also really solid. The best of whom is probably Stellan Skarsgård as the villainous, repulsive, and intimidating Vladimir Harkonnen, Baron of the enemy House Harkonnen. And I can't overstate just how important this specific ensemble cast is to this movie, because it is really easy for a grand and heady sci-fi flick like Dune to feel cold and distant and hollow, but the performances here really help provide a sense of humanity and warmth. to make these otherwise stoic and calculating characters feel like real human beings, and to make this densely rich mythology surprisingly easy to follow along with, and to make this entire world come to life in such a visually striking way, I gotta give major props to Denis Villeneuve for pulling it off and making it all seem so effortless. Villeneuve is the best director working in Hollywood, and is probably now my new favorite director. I love Christopher Nolan, but his films can feel a little more sloppy and convoluted when compared to Villeneuve's. I am looking forward to Nolan's next film, based on the life of J. Robert Oppenheimer, the man who helped create the atomic bomb, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't more excited for Dune Part 2. I can't wait to see Dune Part 2, and I can't wait to watch Part 1 over and over again until Part 2 is released. Sure, the pacing of Part 1 can be a little slow, and certain elements could be explained a little bit better, and the ending can feel a little anticlimactic, but none of these things took away from the fact that watching Dune was one of the best theatrical experiences that I've ever had, ever. This movie is a true cinematic experience unlike anything I've ever seen before, and it deserves to be seen on the biggest and loudest screen possible. So if you have the chance to see Dune in a theater and you haven't seen it already, you should definitely do yourself the favor and go see it. So as always, thanks for watching.